Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Who Asked You, a video podcast series that I created to answer tattoo related questions from a professional tattoo artist perspective. My name is Robia and I will be your professional tattoo artist today. I have been a tattoo artist and a shop owner out of San Diego County for the last 11 years, and I've been around tattooing and piercing and permanent makeup for about 18 years. So today I want to talk to you guys about how much tattoos cost. How much is it? What is the price of a tattoo? How much does it cost? This is a big question. It's a difficult question to answer. So just like in my first podcast that I did, Do Tattoos Hurt? This is going to be me giving you information so that you can just be a little bit more educated on the subject. I'm not going to be able to exactly tell you how much your tattoo is going to cost, of course, and I'll get into all that. But today we're going to talk about pricing, and also how long a tattoo takes is going to be addressed in this podcast as well, because they're kind of one and the same. How much a tattoo will cost typically will depend on how long the tattoo will take. So, again, I won't be able to tell you how long your tattoo will take, but I'm going to give you enough information so that when you attempt to get tattooed, you can come at it with a little bit more information and understand your artist and understand what it is that's happening when pricing a tattoo. So I think before I go into it, I'm going to give you guys a couple of disclaimers here. Number one, anytime I'm talking about a tattoo artist or a shop, you can assume I am talking about a professional. Whether it is a private studio or a custom shop, or you're at a convention, or you're walking into a street shop, we're going to assume for the sake of this conversation that this is a professional artist in a reputable situation that you are going to. Also, when I'm speaking about rates and all that stuff, of course, it is from my perspective. I've owned a shop here in San Diego, and I've worked in San Diego around tattooing and piercing and what you would call, I guess, the industry. Here in Southern California for over 18 years. So my expertise is really going to come from my local region, my area. So just because I may say something that's how it is from my experience and from the other artists that I've talked to and worked with experience, doesn't mean that that's the case everywhere. So, and that actually kind of leads me to my next point here. It really is important for me to give you this kind of information. It's really important that you understand that all artists are individuals and independent. So when you're attempting to get tattooed and you are approaching a tattoo artist to get tattooed, in most cases, you are actually commissioning an independent artist to put a piece of art onto your body, whether that's a custom piece of art, or even if you're walking into a street shop and you're picking something off of Tattoo Flash, you are still hiring the artist that's going to tattoo you that day. You're commissioning a piece from that artist. So it's important to understand that each artist is an individual. And I think it's important to mention that the only industry standard in the tattoo industry is that, or I should say industry standard amongst tattoo artists, is that there is no industry standard. We are all independent individual artists conducting our business as such. So having said that, I think it's also important, before I go into actual rates and pricing and how that all works, it's important to understand what sort of service you're receiving when you're getting tattooed. I mean, of course you're getting a tattoo, but what sort of service is that? A lot of people like to lump us into categories with, hairdressers, nail techs, estheticians, the beauty industry. And the beauty industry is a wonderful industry. I'm not knocking it in the slightest, but that's not what tattoo artists do. We permanently modify your body. It's more, not quite as along the lines of plastic surgery, because plastic surgery, they're removing body parts and adding body parts. We're not doing that. So it's not quite as invasive, but it is equally permanent. Also, there's a factor of art. You can pick up a painting for $50, or you can pick up a painting for $50,000, or upwards of even more than that. So you've got components of beauty, you've got components of body modification, permanent body modification, And then you also have the component of art. So you have to really understand that when you are attempting to get tattooed by an artist, it's not the same as getting a haircut. It's not going to grow back, but it's not necessarily as invasive as some of the other stuff. And yes, you're purchasing art, but it's art that's going to be on your body forever. So I like to bring that up just so maybe it kind of helps people understand the value of what they're really receiving when they're hiring a tattoo artist or commissioning a piece from an artist to get tattooed. So as I start to talk about pricing and what goes into that, I want to mention why sometimes it's difficult for tattoo artists to just slap a price on something. I get a ton of emails or messages, or even when I'm talking to doing consultations with my clients, or if I'm out in public. And one of the first questions people always ask is, how much is it? How much is it going to cost? Artists get questions like, how much is a sleeve? How much for a tattoo? How much for a back piece? And asking how much is a tattoo is kind of like asking how much is food or how much is a car. I mean, it really depends on what you're getting. And I will state this simply, which is beauty's in the eye of the beholder here. So as long as what you think is beautiful is what you're going for, and the artist is providing you that, then that's the value for you and for your artist. So when just asking a simple question like, hey, how much is a tattoo or how much is a sleeve, it really isn't as simple as being able to just slap a price on something really quick and say, oh yeah, a sleeve is this much, a sleeve is that much, and I'll explain why that is. But I just want to mention that so that if you approach a tattoo artist, especially through an email or through Messenger or a text or a quick phone call or whatever, and you're not sitting down and doing an actual consultation, if you ask the artist, how much is this going to be, and they start asking you questions, I promise you they're not trying to be vague. We would love to be able to just say, oh yeah, that's going to be X amount of dollars. But there's a lot of variables that go into pricing a tattoo, which will lead us now down the road of what those variables are. So the first and foremost, and this is the way I explain it to my clients when they're coming in for a consultation or they're asking me how much a tattoo is, essentially when you are getting a tattoo, you are paying for the artist's time, and other factors that go into the artist's time, of course, expenses, overhead, and then of course, experience levels and how sought out that artist is. If there's an artist that is very popular and very busy and they're booked way in advance, they're probably going to be a little bit more expensive. Typically those artists that are booked in advance, it's because they're well experienced and they're good at what they do and people enjoy getting tattooed by them. So there's going to be a fair amount of factors that go into how the artist has to price something based on their worth, their value, their overhead, and so on. So the main factors for me and for a lot of artists that I know when it comes to pricing out a tattoo, number one, of course, is going to be size. How big the tattoo is going to be, of course, is going to determine how long the tattoo is going to take to do, and therefore will determine the price. Obviously, a big tattoo is going to be more expensive than a small tattoo. You're just spending more time on it. So that one's pretty simple. Size is going to be a factor, and that's something a tattoo artist is going to have to ask you before they can deem any kind of price to it. And speaking of size, a lot of times I will get messages or emails where somebody will say, hey, I want a blah, blah, blah tattoo, whatever it is, a flower tattoo, and I want it palm sized. Size needs to be a little bit more specific than that, because I don't know how big your palm is, and neither does anybody else. I'm 5'2", and I have a tiny little palm. If you are 6'3", your palm is going to be a much different size than my palm is. So when you're trying to explain size to an artist, try to use inches instead of palm size or small, medium, or large, because what might be small to you may not be small to me. What might be large to you may not be large to me. So it's important that there's a definitive size. So using inches is really important. The next factor of pricing a tattoo is going to be the placement on the body, where you're putting this piece. So different parts of our body have different textures of skin, even on the same individual. the inside of the bicep versus even the outside of the bicep is not going to be the same texture of skin. And when an artist is trying to figure out how long something's going to take for them to do, they need to understand what part of the body they're working on. So where you're putting this tattoo on your body, also if it's a sensitive area, your ribs or your sternum or an area that might be sensitive for you near your armpit or something along those lines, the artist may factor in break time, twitching, things like that. So that's a factor too of where it's going on your body, how well you're going to sit for the piece, how delicate that skin is, whether the artist has to really slow down if they're working through scar tissue over stretch marks, that kind of stuff. So that's what's going to play a big role as well, not just size of the tattoo, but also placement. Then as you start trying to really figure out exactly how long something's going to take, the next step is details. And this is where it really, really varies. So you can take a 6-inch by 6-inch space and put, for example, some simplistic, lightly shaded imagery in there, such as, I don't know, maybe we'll use a daisy. So you put a simple, couple of black and gray, simple shaded, simplistic outlined daisies in a 6-inch by 6-inch space. That's going to take X amount of time. And I don't use an actual time factor because I tattoo at different speeds than other tattoo artists do. So whatever that time factor is for them. But that same artist can take a 6 by 6-inch space and let's say we throw in some koi fish or a koi fish where it's got lots of scales and it's got lots of details. And now you're dealing with more elaborate shading and say now we're talking about color. So that same 6-inch by 6-inch space could take 2 to 3 times longer than the simplistic tattoo in the exact same size. So details are really important as you get into realism, as you get into a lot more detail. You'll discover that that's one of the main components of how long the tattoo will take, besides just size and placement on the body. Also, experience level is going to play a big factor on how somebody prices their tattoos. Somebody who's been tattooing for 2 or 3 years and they're still learning and they're still growing and maybe they're not taking on big elaborate stuff is probably going to price themselves a little bit lower. Somebody who's been tattooing for 10 or 15 years, who's highly sought after, who has a lot of experience, maybe they have some specialties, their prices are going to go up accordingly. And that's a really important thing for people to understand and quite frankly honor, and I'll get into that as well in a second. So you've got size, you've got placement, you've got details. That also includes like color saturation versus simplistic shading, like I said before. Also, you've got the artist's experience levels. And then another contributing factor, and this may not always be the case, but is your geographic location. So I live in San Diego, Southern California, one of the more expensive places in the nation to live. Our cost of living is very high. Our cost of doing business is very high. If you live in Ohio or Oklahoma, where the cost of living is maybe a third of what it is here, or half, I don't actually know the numbers, you're going to probably pay a little bit less. But again, not necessarily. Again, your artist is really going to be the person to determine that based on their experience level and how sought out they are, and again, all the other factors. So you've got all these different components that are going to play a factor in pricing a tattoo. So this is why it's a little difficult for you to just say, hey, tattoo artist, how much for a bird? The artist is going to go, well, what kind of bird? And where are we putting it? And how realistic are we doing it? And are we talking color? Are we talking black and gray? So there's a lot of questions that we as artists have to ask you in order to figure out how long something's going to take us to do so that we can then apply our rates to it. So now let's talk a little bit about rates. And I hesitate on this one a little bit because I know what I charge, I know what some other artists in my area charge, but I don't know every artist everywhere around the world and what they charge. So when I say actual pricing and numbers, take it with a grain of salt. Understand that, again, I am speaking from my perspective and what I understand and know within the industry. So for me, I charge $200 an hour. Now, I can tell you that I charge $200 an hour, but that doesn't actually tell you what I can accomplish in an hour. So that's why, again, it's important to do consultations with your artist and talk to your artist about time factor. So how long a tattoo is going to take is going to determine my hourly rate applied to that. So if a tattoo is going to take 4 hours because of the detail, the placement, the size, color saturation, and all that, that's how I'm coming up with the number. You know, if it's 3 hours, it's $600 because I charge $200 an hour. There are artists out there that charge way less. I'm a 11-year experienced artist. I do have some specialties that I do, and my prices are based on where I live, the cost of doing business, my experience level, my expertise, and again, how far booked out I am. There are artists that I know around my area, I would say minimum probably $100 an hour. Maybe there's somebody out there doing it cheaper, but I'm not aware of them. So you can expect to pay a minimum, at least in San Diego, for a lesser experienced artist, probably around $100 an hour or so. There are artists that I know that are highly experienced, far more experienced than even myself, that charge $350, $400 an hour. So it really is up to the artist and their clientele. If an artist is asking a certain amount of money and they're receiving it, then that's their value. And they get to determine that based on their experience levels and how they feel about their work, and again, their specialties and so on. Just like I said before, with art in general, you can buy a painting for $50 or you can buy a painting for $50,000. It's up to you whether or not you want to buy it, but the artist is who determines the value. So also another way that people will price, I know artists that do sit fees, where they may not charge an hourly rate. They may do a half day sitting at a certain price, or a full day sitting at a certain price, or a multiple session tattoo at a certain price. So not every artist uses an hourly rate. And again, like I said in the beginning, it's really important for you to understand that each artist is an individual and they are pricing their work accordingly. So there really isn't a right or a wrong way to do it. It is how that individual independent artist sees their work and their value, and that's how they're placing a price on it based on the factors I mentioned before: size, placement, detail, shading, saturation, geographic location. I feel like a Johnny Cash song right now. Anyway, okay, so one of the things I want to talk about with pricing is this a little bit of etiquette. If you're going into a tattoo shop or you're talking to a tattoo artist and you want to get tattooed, and you love that artist's work, or you've been following them on Instagram or whatever the situation is, and you walk in to get tattooed by that artist, one thing I can say for certain is everybody who comes into a professional shop to get tattooed expects their artist to put 100 or 110% into every tattoo they do. Nobody goes in to get tattooed and is like, oh yeah, just half-ass it, bro, it's cool. It's not like that. So when you come into a shop, you're expecting that artist to be a professional, to give you quality work, and to give you a good experience. I think the same needs to be reciprocated from clients. When you go in and they give you a price, don't haggle, don't barter with them, don't lessen the value that they've placed on their work. When I'm talking to my clients about it and I assess a price to something, if I get a reaction where the client's like, oh wow, really? Or if I get a client who says, well, will you do it for X amount of dollars, and it's less than what I quoted, it kind of reduces the value. It makes me want to go, well, no, I don't want to do the tattoo at all now because you don't appreciate what I have to offer. So when you go to an artist, don't demean them or dishonor their work. If you've sought them out and you've come to them, honor the pricing. And again, remember, this is going on your body forever. If you honor their value, they will give you 110% in effort, I promise. Every artist I know, we're our worst critics. We want to do the best piece we can do on you. And in that, we also want to make a good living, and a lot of us have sacrificed many years to get good at what we do. So I think it's just really important to express that as a tattoo artist myself, I deal with clients that sometimes will want to pay less than what I'm asking. And at that point, it really kind of takes the fun out of it for me. I don't want to, it's not all about the money, it's about the art, but this is what I do for a living. So I want to make good money and make a good living, and I want to give you an epic tattoo. And if you pay the artist's value and you get an epic tattoo, everybody wins in that situation. So one last thing I want to mention on that is, the only person that should ever determine the value of your tattoo is your tattoo artist. If you have a friend of yours who has 3 tattoos from 3 different artists, especially if it's not the artist that you want to get tattooed by, how much they think your tattoo should cost is irrelevant. The only person, they are not a good source of information for how much a tattoo would cost or should cost just because they have a couple tattoos. And I don't want to get into quality of tattoo work too much. I don't want to say what's right, what's wrong. But at the end of the day, the only person that should determine the cost of your tattoo is your tattoo artist. So lastly, I'd just like to mention too, when you're getting a price from a tattoo artist, there's another component that may be a factor, which is commission. Some tattoo artists are working in shops and they are paying a percentage or a booth rental to the shop. So just because your tattoo artist quotes you a price doesn't mean they're pocketing all that money. I don't really want to go into what the percentages are. I don't think that that's any of my business, what artists are agreeing to in their shops or what booth rentals should or should not be. But I do think that it's important to understand that there is a cost of overhead. There's a cost of doing business here too. So if your tattoo artist is quoting you X amount of dollars for that tattoo, understand that there's a good chance they're only keeping a percentage of that. So I think that wraps it up. I think the last piece of little advice I'd like to give you guys on this one, and I tell this to people all the time, when it comes to getting tattooed and talking about pricing should be, I understand pricing is important, and without knowing how much something's going to be, you don't know whether or not you can sign up for it. So I'm not saying that pricing is not important, but when it comes to getting your body permanently modified for the rest of your life, price should be the last thing on your mind. Really, quality of work, relationship with your artist, getting what you want forever should be the primary focus. Now, if you go into a shop and it was more than you thought, wait, save, get what you really want, rather than try to fit a square peg in a round hole and shove a tattoo into a budget, or try to shrink a tattoo that needs to be large in order to fit it into a price range. Just wait. You're going to pay for this once. It's going to be on your body forever. And yes, there is laser surgery out there. Of course, you can get it removed, but you're going to be probably left with a scar. You'll know it was there for sure. So never get a tattoo based on price alone, or don't not get tattooed based on price alone. And obviously, I hope this to be obvious. Don't ever get a tattoo with the idea that you can remove it. It's not the point. If you're not sure, wait. If you can't afford it, wait. And save up and get what you really want. You'll make that choice once, you'll live with it forever. All right, so I think once again, I just want to reiterate, and I know I've said this over and over again, but I think it's so important for people to just understand, when you are commissioning a tattoo artist to tattoo you, you are commissioning that individual. Artists are independent. There isn't right, there isn't wrong. If you know an artist that can do it cheaper, don't insult your artist by telling them that. Just go get it done cheaper, and hopefully the quality will be there. If not, then, well, you can always find a cover-up artist. All right, so I think that wraps it up for the most part here. I know I wasn't able to give you a definitive answer here on how much your tattoo should cost or how long your tattoo will take. That is a very individual thing based on your tattoo, your body, your artist, etc., and your region. All right, well, that wraps up my second episode ever of Who Asked You on how much do tattoos cost. I hope it was informative. If you are digging my podcast, you can subscribe. You can find my podcast on Spotify and Apple iTunes under Who Asked You Tattoos. You can watch my podcast on YouTube at Who Asked You. Or if you have any questions for me that you'd like me to address, or if you're an artist and there's something that you would like to talk about on how you conduct yourself independently as an artist, you can get a hold of me through my website at robiatattoos.com. And that about wraps it up, my friends. I again want to thank you guys for hanging out with me on another episode of Who Asked You, and I look forward to talking to you very soon.